G.K. Chesterton once commented that every modern conversation begins one step too late. And I think it's certainly true when we think of the church. Immediately we think of its structure. And so the church is made up of the ordained, religious, and lay. If you are neither religious nor ordained, you are a lay person, you really can't help it. There is a wide, and what I want to look at is the degree to which this has formed Catholic imagination. I think imagination is enormously important. Many of you know that I am something of an advocate of the work of Charles Taylor and his project, which is to ask the question, not so much who are we, but who do we imagine ourselves to be? And it's in the matter that we imagine ourselves to be that we make our major decisions, how we vote, how we purchase, and so on. I think this is not only true of secular society, which has been Charles Taylor's focus, but also of the church. And so how does a Catholic imagine himself or herself to be? Now, when we ask that question, it seems to me there are competing, if you like, paradigms in the recent history of the church. There's a dominant paradigm, and then a paradigm which is waiting to be born in a certain manner. By paradigm, I mean how we relate actually to each other. And so the model, if you wish, of our actual relationship dependent very much upon how we imagine ourselves to be. And so what is this? We read in Christus Dominus, this is the document of the Second Vatican Council on the bishops. The parish exists solely for the care of souls. And so I think the one dominant paradigm, if you wish, model of relationship has been this, that the business of the church is somehow the care of souls. And that being the case, then the work of the church is undertaken by those who are formed for the sake of the care of souls, that is, the hierarchy and, in some measure, the religious who participate with them. In this model, the laity have no real agency in the church, because the care of souls means the sacramental ministry, the spiritual direction, if you wish, of the community. And if this is the case, then it is indeed difficult to see that the laity have any real agency in the church. Now, I'm obviously not referring to the ministries whereby lay people participate in the care of souls, because these are delegated roles, and after all, are not proper to the laity. We call them extraordinary ministers. When the laity undertakes such ministries, they are doing this strictly by delegation. But otherwise, laymen and women really have no voice and no active role in the church. This is not true, but it is our imagination, I would argue. And so when a Catholic says the church teaches, the Catholic really means the hierarchy teaches. When a priest, by the way, says that the church teaches, very often the priest also means the hierarchy teaches, and the bishops can't pass it any further. I don't quite know what they do. But we all tend to count ourselves out of the church, or standing almost, and so we know the model. There is the priest, pastor, and his flock, or maybe more realistically, the priest, pastor, and his critics. But that, again, the laity have a real agency in the church is not the case. And now, the Vatican Council, and certainly the letter that we're looking at, Christi Fidelis Laity, Christ's lay faithful people, this is again the 30th anniversary of that encyclical, or it was apostolic exhortation, or it was in November, articulates a different sort of relationship and a different sort of paradigm. The document actually asks for co-responsibility in the church. This is because the business of the church is not simply the care of souls, but rather the mission to bring the gospel to the world. So we read in the first encyclical letter of St. John Paul II, Redemptor Hominis, the church wishes to serve this single end. So the church is a single end. That each person may be able to find Christ in order that Christ may walk with each person the path of life with the power of the truth about man and the world that is contained in the mystery of the incarnation and the redemption, and with the power of the love that is radiated by that truth. So this is the single end of the church. This is our measure. Not simply the care of souls, but in a sense, certainly this is the care of souls, but not in the way that we have imagined it. And so, given that this is the case, then all of a sudden the laity begin to have real agency in the church. The lay apostolate is a participation in the salvific mission of the church itself. This is from the Magentium of the Council. Through their baptism and confirmation, all are commissioned to that apostolate by the Lord himself, not by delegation. Thus, every lay person, in virtue of the very gifts bestowed upon him or her, is at the same time a witness and a living instrument of the mission of the church herself. And so there is a second, if you like, paradigm that the council proposes. And this is one in which the laity are actually co-responsible in the church's mission. Co-responsible. Now, I ask, what would real co-responsibility look like? And here, I think if we're going to take it seriously, we must say that at least four things would have to pertain. First of all, if we are co-responsible in the mission of the church, the laity, the ordained, the religious, then we must have equal responsibility for the church's mission, that each man and each woman may meet Christ risen. Equal responsibility. If the clergy have more responsibility or greater responsibility than do the laity in this, then we cannot speak of co-responsibility. But there's a second thing we would have to realize if truly we mean co-responsibility, and that is that the tasks themselves toward the end must have equal dignity. What do I mean? If my job is to give this talk, and your job is to set up the chairs, then your job is important, but we can't really speak of co-responsibility. If my job is to put you to sleep, and your job is to pick their pockets, then we can speak of co-responsibility, because equal task has the same dignity, or lack thereof. And so, not only is it necessary, if we're to speak of co-responsibility, that we have equal responsibility for the end, but also equal dignity in the task. There's a third thing that would have to pertain, and that is, if we are truly to speak of co-responsibility, it must be a question that there is equal voice in discerning the mission itself. And so the mission cannot be, and the documents themselves say this. If we look at Apostolicum Actuositatem, the document on the laity, or in Christi Fidelis Laity, it specifies that somehow there must be real conversation between lay and the hierarchy, the religious, the church, with respect to discerning the mission. And so equal voice, if you wish, in that discernment. And then finally, there would have to be, if we're speaking of co-responsibility, some means by which we call each other to account. That is, there's a real conversation and a holding to account of those with whom we are in mission. Unless those four things are satisfied, we are not speaking of co-responsibility. Now, why would we not speak of co-responsibility? Well, because all of this is filtered through a different paradigm, and the paradigm is the care of souls. And this tension, if you wish, is reflected, I believe, both in the documents of the Council and also in the document Christi Fidelis Laity. And so, for example, both paradigms are represented in the council. On the one hand, the council, as we have heard, speaks of the mission of the laity having been assigned, the apostolate is given in baptism and assigned by the Lord himself, not by delegation. This was specifically debated at the council. And so, in a sense, our community is apostolic not only in that we are founded upon the apostolic testimony and we continue it through their successors, the bishops, but also that we are a community that has equal responsibility for an apostolic mission to the world. We are an apostolic community. That model, if you wish, or that paradigm is not yet true. Now, I test it in my own life. Right now, I'm involved, and thanks to Bishop Soto, who is here with us, we've had the opportunity actually to begin a serious formation for the laity in the Diocese of Sacramento. And this is collaborative. I'm collaborating with Sean Bryan, who is here today, filming wherever he is. There. Sean, if you don't know him, is the papal ninja, if you watch American Ninja Warrior. Yeah, one of the best in the country. But we work together. And it is difficult for me to work with actually anybody. Sean will be canonized possibly after this. But at the moment where I, having said something I think particularly profoundly on tape, which is to go out, Sean stops me and says, "They'll never understand that, do it again." Suddenly my zeal for collaboration falters. Because we clergy are not used to being collaborative in that way. We really aren't. And it never was our imagination and still isn't. And so it seems to me the enormous challenge for us is not that we haven't articulated well the proper role of the laity in the church because of our focus upon the church's mission. That has been, in a way, well articulated, but we haven't an imagination for it. The imagination we have has come again, I believe, from the care of souls, and for the Catholic, believing Catholic, that imagination means personal piety. And so the manner in which a layperson is to proclaim the gospel is by the example of a holy life. Now, in our secular culture, the holy life appears to be certainly countercultural, if not nerdy. We need a different focus, a different imagination. We can offer a thorough formation, but we're offering it to men and women who have no imagination for it. Why would they want this? What is it needed for? After all, formation is for the sake of a mission, and the laity, according to our imagination, don't have one. Or again, we can bring this to our clergy, and the clergy are perfectly good-willed. If there's clericalism in the church, and I believe there is paradigmatically, it's not intended. It's not ill-intended. I think it's not intended at all. Yet, it is our imagination. When a layperson approaches, we, by our formation, conceive that they have been placed in our care. And again, the end of this is personal holiness, personal piety. Now, when the documents speak of the obligation to holiness as the first and most profound challenge for us, they do not mean simply personal piety. But somehow we must communicate what the church herself now has asked, and we must do it in a way that actually can focus and wake up, if you wish, propose a different imagination for what it is to be Catholic. One of the reasons for this conference, I think, is to try to figure out somehow how to do that. Because imagination plays at almost a pre-rational place. It's a subliminal thing. But this is how we have learned, in a way, and to some degree taught this. And that, I think, is our problem. Now, we see that the two paradigms at war in the documents themselves. And so in Christus Dominus, again, we read, the sole purpose of the parish, again, is the care of souls. The pastors of the church are reminded that the care of souls extends beyond the parish boundary to include anyone who lives in the parish limits. If the document says the pastor is incapable of meeting certain groups of people, and of course he's incapable, they'd run from him. Some of you know that I used to have what I called my pub ministry in Seattle. That is, I would go to a pub, Murphy's on 45th, for those of you who know the city, in the University District, marvelous place, and Greg, you would know this, and quite decent Irish stew when they serve it. But I would go not looking like this. I would go in mufti and talk to students. And somewhere, maybe an hour or so into our conversation, one of the students would say to me, "And what do you do?" And I would say, "Actually, I'm the pastor of Blessed Sacrament Church. I'm a Catholic priest." And the conversation at that point would come to a screaming halt. There would be a shocked look on their faces. What have I said? I told one kid, "Your mother sent me." Obviously, the work of the church pertains where the relationships live. And so there will be, folks, groups of people in any parish that the pastor doesn't have access to. And the document goes on to say that when this pertains, the pastor can seek the assistance even of the laity. Now, this is in the same council that speaks of co-responsibility for the laity when it considers the mission of the church ad extra. And so I think we have, in a way, a fundamental sort of problem or challenge. And it has to do something as with the depth of Catholic imagination, and how is it that we can therefore promote a different vision for the church? I think this is what's in front of us. I think we have to pay attention to this, those of us who are in the hierarchy by means of our preaching. We need formed lay people who, in their actual relationships with their pastors, the manner in which this is lived, can alter, if you wish, or change the paradigm. But the paradigm is at war, and we see this reflected in the documents themselves. And so, Christe Fidelis Laity, in one sense, a marvelous indication of what is possible with respect to the lay apostolate. On the other hand, the care of souls, in a certain sense, is still the dominant paradigm, even in the imagination of St. John Paul. And so, what do we do about this as a people? I believe, in a certain sense, the difficulties we are now facing in the church are not so much cause, but symptom. And it really is necessary for us as a whole church to present ourselves to the world. But again, the challenge is that we really must have the imagination for it. And I think if you find apparent contradictions in the documents, you will find that they are founded upon the fact that we are truly dealing with different paradigms, different imaginations with respect to the church herself. One last remark. Yves Congar, my great hero, once said that in order for the role of the laity in the church to be appreciated, the church must come to two realizations. Number one, there's a world out there. Number two, it's not the church. So perhaps we can begin there. Thank you.